Welcome back, Math Marbles. And in this lesson, we're going to start looking at scatter plots and specifically identifying associations. So we're going to talk about how to accurately describe the relationship between our X and Y values or our inputs, outputs. We're going to see how do we tell the difference really between a positive and negative correlation, and how do we identify if any association exists on a scatter plot. Welcome to the first lesson of a new unit, and in this one we're going to look at scatter plots. And why do we call them scatter plots? Because all our points are scattered around. They're not just linear. They don't make one straight line. They are scattered all over, and this is what happens in real life. We don't always have exact numbers. Sometimes our data is scattered all the way about. However, there are certain trends that happen, and we're going to learn to look at this scatter plot kind of like a story, meaning we're going to read it from left to right the same way we read stories from left to right, and tell what is generally happening, what is the trend that we're noticing with our points. And as I'm looking at this story, we know that it's about tickets to Funland, so that's our kind of like our main idea. And two things are happening. So as the number of tickets are purchased, what is happening to the cost in dollars? There's a relationship. We're also going to look at the relationship between our X and Y. So let's tell the story here. What is the story? What is happening with ticket prices to Funland? So as the number of tickets purchased increases. So in other words, as we read this from left to right, as the story continues in this fashion, what is happening to the cost of the tickets? Well, our cost of tickets is decreasing. So we see a trend here. So as one thing happens, comma, the cost per ticket decreases. And just looking at the points, do you notice how our points are generally pretty linear? They almost make a straight line. So this is showing a good correlation. So it's showing that it's not completely random. The trend is pretty consistent. Hit pause so you can jot this down in our notes, and we're going to learn how to read more scatter plots in this way, looking at trends, knowing what our graph is about, what is the relationship, and is there a strong connection, correlation between those two parts of our scatter plot. And there's a spectrum. There are all different ways these different scatter plots can tell the plot of a story or a trend line. So we're going to look at different correlations. So in this first one, notice we have a perfect positive correlation. So positive, think of it like it is an increase. So that's one reason why we call it a positive. But also look at how tightly wound those trends are. They are very close together. All our data is pretty close. So that's why we call it a positive. It's a perfect positive correlation. Okay, all our points are pretty much together. Now, in our second one, we have a strong positive correlation. So again, we do have an increase, so that the increase is what makes it positive. But you can see that our points are they're kind of spreading out a little bit. It's a little bit wider than the first one. The first one, they were perfectly tight together. But there's still a positive correlation, meaning as one increases, so does the other. And it's a strong trend. Now, in our next one, we have a weak positive correlation, meaning, it's still generally our points are going in this direction. Generally, they're moving in this direction, but you can see they're definitely more spread out and they're more scattered about. So that's what makes this a weaker correlation. But most of our points are still moving up in that general trend. It still looks like it's increasing. let's go to no correlation, and our points are all over the place. They're all over our graph. There is no connection at all. There's no connection between our X and our Y. There's no predictability. Our points aren't going in like a general trend. They're just scattered about. So now let's talk about negative correlations. And with our negative correlations, we have a decrease, meaning our graphs, it looks like our slopes are going down. Our story is decreasing. As one increases, the other decreases. So here in a positive, they both increased. So as X increased, Y increased. But with our negatives, as our X increases, our Y's are going to decrease. All right, so let's start with the weak negative correlation. And again, you can see the trend going down, but they're spread about. And so that's what makes it weak, that they're kind of spread. Versus a stronger correlation, they're more tightened together. When you have a perfect correlation, they make almost a perfect straight line. All right, so that's what we're looking for. And we're talking about correlations, we're talking relationships. We can see if it's perfect, they make almost a straight line. If they're generally tight together, it's a strong. If they're kind of spread out a little bit, it becomes a weaker correlation. But if they're all over the place, it is no correlation. And we know if it's positive, if our trend line is increasing, it is a negative correlation if they are decreasing. You're going to use this chart a lot, so just be sure to have it ready so you can keep referring to it during the next few lessons. Okay, in our multiple choice question, we want to find a scatter plot that has a negative correlation. So automatically, when we hear a negative, we want almost like a negative slope. So we know that somehow our graph is going to go down. So just looking at it, I can automatically get rid of A because it has a positive correlation, as well as D. D also has a positive correlation, and my highlighter can help us see that. You can see the trend moving up for these. Looking around, we also see in C, our points are all over the place. This is no correlation. So I can eliminate it for a reason. And lastly, for our final one, we have most of our points going in this downward spiral. So we have found it. This B has a negative correlation. Okay, so again, I'm just using my rational thinking. So if it's positive, I know my points will trend up, meaning both of them are increasing, both X and Y. But here, as the number of people increases, the price per ticket right over here is decreasing. So this represents a negative. And if your points are all over the place, there's no correlation, no connection at all. All right, hit pause and jot this down, and let's get some practice going.